Welcome everybody to the afternoon Board of County Commissioners meeting for July 21st, 2020. The first item on our agenda for this afternoon is 12A, and this is Order 20-07-21-08 in the matter of adopting the FY 2021 and FY 24-25 Lane County Capital Improvement Plan and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute contracts for road and bridge projects with terms less than 10 years. With us is Mike Pinwell, Capital Projects Manager, and Peggy Kepler, County Engineer. Feel free to start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Buck, Commissioners. Can you see my screen, the presentation?
Yes.
Great. All right. This is the, sorry I didn't update the front slide. This is the final capital improvement plan for FY 2021 through FY 24-25. You did preview the draft version in December. This is the third annual 5-year CIP. The goals of the CIP are to help us with planning to maintain our assets, provide some transparency so that policymakers and the community has the ability to review our planned projects, and in conjunction with the strategic plan to enable better planning, prioritization, and decision making. You'll see that there's 3 types of projects included in the plan. There are the standard plans, which are projects that have identified funding and have completed an initial planning process. There are pre-planning forms, projects that do not have identified funding or have not completed the initial planning process. And then there are community investments, and these are projects that are not owned by Lane County but receive some kind of county contribution. The threshold for a project to be included in the CIP is $50,000, and the projects listed in the FY 2021 budget are included in the standard forms in the CIP document. There are currently 114 Lane County projects included in the draft CIP, 77 that are standard and 37 that are pre-planning. And this is about a 50 project increase from last year, which I think is an indication of how we're using the document more and more to plan our projects, and including more and more as we gather projects from around the county. The project categories are facilities, roads, technology, and solid waste, in addition to the community projects. Project summary, you can see how the breakdown is here of the various project categories. The 5-year total expenses for standard projects are $127.6 million this year. That's about a $50-some million increase from last year, again, demonstrating how we are using the document and the planning process to identify our needs better and better now that we're in the third iteration of the CIP. Projects are funded by a variety of sources: the Capital Improvement Fund, Road Fund, General Fund, and other funds and revenues. Public Works has a number of funds that fund parks projects and solid waste. We've got HMHS funding a couple of larger projects this year with the drug treatment clinic on West 11th and the DDS office building, the MLK campus. The road fund projects, board approval of the final CIP will also delegate contract authority to county administrator for the funds for the projects that are in the CIP for this coming year. The review process, with the facilities projects, the related forms go through the facilities committee for review, prioritization, and approval. Technology projects need to be recommended, the TMT needs to recommend policy on what constitutes a CIP project, and they review those policies. Public Works has a very well-oiled process over many years for the road fund, road and bridge projects. It's now documented entirely in the CIP. There are some non-road fund projects that have yet to be identified and prioritized, and again, that includes projects such as ones in parks and solid waste and some of the other areas within public works. Community investments, we have 13 forms this year. That's up 2 from last year's 11. I think that you're familiar with most of these. The last 3 are ones where Public Works is acting on behalf of these other communities to complete road projects. And you can see the variety of projects there that have been really made an impact in the community. And that's about it. The next steps are to adopt this CIP if you see fit. As I mentioned, the board order included in the process today to allow the road and bridge projects to be completed by the county administrator. And then after that, we'll begin work on the next draft for the next 5 years. And with that, I'll turn it over to Peggy if you want to add anything from the Public Works perspective.
I actually have nothing more to say on them, but I'm open to any questions that you might have. We're looking forward to another heavy year of construction. We've started right now, so open to questions.
Mr. Ricca?
Chair Buck, Commissioners, I do want to take a very quick moment and introduce Shawn Waite, who has joined us for this particular portion. She may look familiar to you in terms of her previous role at the county as the Administrative and Finance Manager for Health and Human Services. As of a couple months back, she's come over to the CAO and is now our Facilities Manager. That means she oversees all of our custodial and maintenance services. But in addition, for the first time, we've incorporated the capital improvements program so that we can really understand and manage the full life cycle of our buildings. And I have to tell you, I'm absolutely thrilled that she was willing to come over and join us. So she'll be available for questions and answers as well.
Very good. Welcome to the new role. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck. I just have a quick question for, just a general question, but first a correction from Mike Penwell. Ms. Penwell, you said that our road fund Public Works has been well oiled for many years. It's actually been chip sealed, I believe, not oiled. That's a silly correction. But just a quick question regarding legislative action that I believe was called the OTIA, or Transportation Improvement, that allowed us more money into Public Works. Can you give us a tiny brief on how that has affected the department?
Sure, thank you. When we first received the money, or the announcement that we were going to have House Bill 2017, I think was what you're asking about. Yes. We anticipated a bit more robust financial package for us. It hasn't been as big, but it has allowed us to make some changes in our program. So prior to House Bill 2017, we were focusing on $3 million a year, and our emphasis was right around pavement preservation. Our current annual road fund dollars are $4.25 million. So we've come up just about $1.25 million since House Bill 2017. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the COVID-19. We've seen some loss in our funding, and we're just kind of making sure that the projects that we have identified, we continue to complete the design, get those on at least on the shelf, so if any other funding comes available, we can apply for grants and different funding sources.
Commissioner Farr, you're on mute.
Thank you for that response, Peggy. That was perfect. Not as much as we expected, but still more than we had prior to that. particularly following our failure at the ballot box regarding local funding, a local source. I have questions regarding buildings and progress on buildings, but I'm going to wait and see if other commissioners ask those questions before I ask them. I may come back for a second round if my questions aren't asked. Commissioner Chair Butt.
Any other comments, questions? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. And I'm glad that Commissioner Farr brought up the House Bill 2017. I know that many of the 30 additional staff that were referenced early in our board meeting are in Public Works and are being hired in the Roads Division specifically to increase our ability to do additional paving preservation and bridge work. And I appreciate that we were able to get that bill passed and get that funding directed towards counties. You know, one of the things I have a bit of a question about, and I guess, Mike, you're probably the one that can answer this best. You know, Roads has long been doing CIPs, no different than when I was at EWEB and we did annual 5-year CIPs, 10-year, you know, with a 10-year horizon on them and then a 20-year master plan, because those sorts of systems generally are easily laid out to do that. As I look at the CIP, particularly your one of your original pictures that had the bar and the pie chart, the bar charts and the pie charts next to it split up between facilities, roads, and IT, and I think a few other things. I see that really all the money for facilities seems to all be in the first 2 years. Same thing with IT and all that. Like haven't gotten to the point yet where we're getting a full 5-year facilities plan for buildings and other infrastructure outside of our road system. Is that just a part of trying? I know we haven't completely stood up asset management yet. You know, what do we need to do to get to where we're actually looking at the full 5-year horizon of projects rather than just a 2-year horizon when it comes to anything other than roads?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. The missing link in that is a good facility assessment, and we just recently did a full facility condition assessment late last year. The assessment was done. We just received the final report a couple of months ago, and we're in the process of reviewing all that data. There's a tremendous amount of data there. And so going through that and pouring through it and using that as a basis of prioritization is what will help us take a longer view. You're right. It's been more of a function of we know our immediate needs and the amount of money that we have, and so the horizon hasn't been much farther than a year or two, but we now have the data where we can start looking out further, and so I think you'll see more projects further out over the next couple of iterations of the CIP.
Good. I think that's an important piece of financial planning information that the board needs as we look at all of the costs that come into the county. Maintaining our assets and the renewal and replacement of assets is a significant cost that we have to also plan for. And a 2-year horizon really doesn't look out far enough for that. And it's a matter of just getting in the habit of doing it. I also appreciate that we're probably missing a lot of information in that the parks, we have a new master plan in 2018, but we haven't gotten to the point of how do we fund that, and is there going to be some kind of new funding source? So I know that there'll be, if we get through and identify a funding source for parks, we're going to be adding a whole nother list of projects to that, and I expect to see those listed out 5 years, because I pretty well know that the park staff's been keeping track of all the deferred maintenance and capital work that we need there. Final question, Lane Event Center. You know, we did have a pretty significant master plan for them, and as far as facility improvements went, that was pretty well laid out. But our TRT is taking a kind of tanked are we still going to be able to keep up with some of those improvements that we have been planning out at the event center, or are we just going to be kind of putting stuff on hold? And is that wrapped into this 5-year CIP at all, or do we that'll just get into next year's amendment?
Currently, Lane Event Center projects are not in the CIP. That's something that I would like to see added at some point, but they run their own separate capital planning process because they're sort of an independent enterprise. But I think it would be a nice goal to fold that into the 5-year CIP.
Yeah,
with all the other projects.
Yeah, if we're looking at projects like the bike path that the city of Veneta is looking to build as safe route to school project, it seems, and they're the majority, stakeholder in that. Seems like we should be, the event center, which is owned by the county, even though it's in an enterprise fund, probably should be part of this report in the future. So I guess that's my only suggestion there. All right, well, thank you. That answers my questions.
Any other comments or questions? All right, I do not see any more. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve Order 20-07-21-08 as presented.
So moved.
Seconded, but I did want to request, if Commissioner Farr, if you said you had other questions, and I didn't know if they were all answered or not.
Sure, we'll, I'll just mention moved by Commissioner Bozovich, second by Commissioner Burney, and discussion. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. Excuse me, and I am unable on my home computer to pull up the items from the agenda item itself. But regarding our buildings that are in process right now, we have a number of them. You'd mentioned parole and probation, our MAT facility on West 11th. Do you have a brief on that, on how we are, and are all of those buildings on track right now for scheduled opening dates?
Yes, they're all tracking well. We actually have the pre-construction meeting for the MAT clinic in 12 minutes. So I'm glad we got through this item in a timely manner. The parole and probation project, we just completed a value engineering round to look at keeping costs contained on that. We have a really good plan moving forward on that, forging ahead. The DDS office building planning process is going quite well, targeting bidding by the end of the year. And then the tech services remodel here in the public service building is on track to bid. That'll probably go out in August and bid in early September.
Well, thank you for that update. The DDS facility is the one that I'm the keenest on, which is going to be built in the place of the old armory. I've been harping about the armory for a long time, and I've gotten no results to satisfy what I wanted to do with the armory and the armory property. However, I'm pretty satisfied that DDS is going to have a new home there. We talked about it at the Mental Health Advisory Committee last week, and Carla over at DDS is particularly excited. I'm looking forward to seeing that facility begin to serve more patients better than they've ever been able to in the past. So thanks very much. Good, lots of bricks and mortar right now in Lane County. Thank you.
Any other comments, Commissioner Burney?
My goal here is to keep you to miss your next meeting. No, I'm sorry. I want to let the board know and thank you and thank Greg and Steve and all others. Mike has been working very strenuously to see which projects the community benefits components could be applied to. He's running, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just going to state he's running into some, he and Jim Cheney are running into some legal obstacles, which is fine because we need to know what they are. Mike, I want to share that I did talk to the building trades and they really appreciate your perspective now and are looking forward to that meeting we're going to set. And I just want to let the board know that the community benefits agreement has not faded away. Mike's looking at where we selectively apply it, and I think we will, on one or two of these buildings, have that to point to also that I think we can all be proud of, because it'll be done in a very pragmatic way, and it will. We're just having jumps getting there. Did I in the most general way describe that correctly, Mike?
Yes, well put. Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, any final comments? I don't see or hear any, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed
Aye.
say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Very good. We'll move on to item 12B. So this is order 20-07-21-09. In the matter of approving a deposit of $10 million with the Public Employees Retirement System to establish a side account with an amortization term of 10 years, together with a $2.5 million employer incentive fund match from the state of Oregon in order to reduce the county's future PERS liability. And with us, it will have Greg Rickoff, our Director of Operations, and Christine Moody, our Budget and Financial Planning Manager.
Thank you, Chair Buck, Commissioners. We also have on the line Robert Tentel, our Finance Manager. In the event we have any questions for him, he's been involved in this process also. So for those of you that are not aware, I'll just briefly describe what a side account with PERS is. We have the ability as an employer to deposit a lump sum into an account that is kept separate from our employer contributions, but it is used as we go through time to pay down part of the percent of our unfunded liability to PERS. And so back in the fiscal year 18-19 budget, at that time, the governor was looking at starting an employer incentive fund where the state would fund a match for employers who could come up with a cash deposit to start a side account. The goal being to reduce the state's overall unfunded liability for PERS. So in that budget, your County Administrator, Steve Mokrahysky, proposed originally $8.2 million. Those funds are one-time funds that are coming out of our health insurance fund and due to a reduction in our workers' comp and general liability claims. And so our reserves were a little higher than necessary in those areas. So we had the one-time funds available to propose making this deposit. Once the legislature funded the employer incentive fund, they put $100 million in that fund, and employers were to apply and be granted. And they also at that time determined that if you made a deposit of at least $10 million, you could then determine how long you wanted the amortization to go. Typically, it's a 20-year period, but if you do the 10 million, then you have a choice between 10, 16, or 20 years. So with that, knowing that our PERS rates are going to be the highest over the next 10 years, we would propose that we also take some money out of our PERS reserve that we use to balance and kind of smooth our PERS bond rate in order to come up with a full 10 million. That is what we applied to the state to see if we could get a match for at least 25% of that 10 million, and we were approved for that match. So that is where the 2.5 million comes in. So we would propose that we start a side account of 12.5 million total over a 10-year period to reduce our PERS liability going forward. I will just also mention, I mentioned it in the memo, but I have a little more recent information that the state with the budget crisis beginning is looking at anywhere to remove funding from, and they are, the co-chair's budget did remove some funding from the employer incentive fund. So it has been encouraged that employers make their deposit as soon as possible so that we don't lose that match. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Any questions, comments? I don't see any. I'll just say that I think this is a very good strategic move for the county to make. Financially, it makes a lot of sense, and I'm in support. Commissioner Burney.
So Christine, in layperson's terms, right now, if we hurry up and put 10 in, we get 2.5 in addition to that from the state.
Correct.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Any other comments? Commissioner Sorensen? Commissioner Sorensen? We cannot hear you. You need to unmute. We're unable to hear you at this time. Commissioner Sorensen?
Get the mic turned on in your headset.
Now you know how I felt this morning.
Are having technical challenges today. We're unable to hear you.
Commissioner Sorensen, this is Diana, and I do show yourself muted, and now I show you're not.
Unfortunately, we still cannot hear what you're saying. And I'm unable to read lips, unfortunately. I'm sorry, we cannot hear you. I'm not sure what other technical things we can do to get his audio working.
Commissioner Sorensen, can you check your headphone mics to see if you got that on a mute?
While you're working on that, I'll go to Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. Christine, this isn't the first time Lane County's deposited into a side account that I'm aware of. Have we had lower PERS increases than some other agencies because we have been prudent in trying to fund as much of our unfunded liability that we as an agency have built up?
So thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, commissioners. So actually, this is the first side account that Lane County is setting up. But I think what you're remembering is that we took out a PERS bond back in early 2000s. So back at that point, you could just make a large lump sum payment to PERS and it would go in with all of your other contributions and just be an instant reduction in your unfunded liability. They no longer do that. They created this side account that's separate. So we do have a PERS bond. So we use that tool that was available to us in early 2000s. When we've done, looked back and done the analysis on whether that was a good decision to make, it has been to the positive for Lane County. What we also did was there were a couple years of that PERS bond that were callable, meaning we could pay them off early. And so we did that. So that is probably also what you're remembering, where when we had excess funds available to us, especially if the legislature would change PERS, we would continue to collect the rate rather than go back and forth on lower rates internally, worried about lawsuits or things being changed. And so we would continue to charge that rate maybe over a year's time until a court decision came down, and then we would have one-time funds to prepay some of that bond. So we have done everything that we can from an employer standpoint to try and control our PERS rates. Also going as far as making sure we have policies in place to make sure we don't have pension spiking occurring and some of those things. So even though it's a state-run system, we have done everything that we can as an employer to reduce our obligations.
Thank you. That allows us to take that and invest that in actual services to the people of the county. So I really appreciate what you guys have done in the financial end in our budget finance office there to lower our PERS costs for this agency.
Let's go back to Commissioner Sorensen to see if his audio is working. Cannot hear you, unfortunately. So sorry. Commissioner Burney.
I know how you feel, Commissioner. Is there any? What is the balance on that bond you were discussing with Commissioner Bozovich, or is that retired?
It is not retired yet. I don't have it in front of me. It'll be paid off. Let's see, I mentioned it in the memo. I looked it up at the time. I think it's 2027, 28 is the year that we will pay it off.
Do you recall the interest rate on that?
Hey,
I think
Christine.
it varied. It's not one that we could refinance, so I would have to look it up, honestly.
Oh, it's okay, because I just,
Unless Robert Tentel happens to know, he's on the call.
Yeah, as of June 30th, Commissioner Bernie, this Robert Tintle, Financial Services Manager, County Treasurer. Hello.
Hi.
Remotely.
remotely right back at you.
That's right. At the end of June 30th, 2019, 2019, which was our last comprehensive annual financial report that was audited, it was $52.3 million that we still have out remaining on the PERS bond, and the expiration date is June 1st, 2028. And so that's why this 10-year period will line up well with the end of our PERS bond being paid off, and we'll get the benefit of this credit through the state of Oregon as well.
No, it all makes sense to me. I was just where I was going with any other questions, I guess, was circumvented if you cannot refinance that bond at these historically low interest rates.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? We're unfortunately not able to hear Commissioner Sorensen at the moment. Okay, with that, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And
Aye.
Commissioner Sorensen, not sure. Yes, it says a yes on a piece of paper. So I think it is. Anybody opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to item 12C, discussion in the matter of presenting our third quarter FY 19-20 financial report. And with us is Christine Moody again.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Commissioners. So I don't know that I have the technology to bring this up on my screen, unfortunately, getting used to using the webcam and being on the laptop versus the main computer, but hopefully you have the report in front of you. So this is the report for fiscal year 19-20, and I'll go through just a few of the items for those that cannot see the report. So this is a report that ended March 31st of 2020. So as everyone can imagine, a lot of this data has now dramatically changed, but we still thought it was important to bring this report to you, and then you'll actually see me again within 3 to 4 weeks where I will provide you with, oh, it looks like Diana's going to bring it up for us maybe, provide you with the fourth quarter. And I have a little bit of initial data that I was seeing this morning on fourth quarter, and I'm sure all of you are also watching it, but just to focus on the third quarter. So back at the end of third quarter, unemployment was at about 4.4% in Lane County. We were looking at the CPI for the West region was about 2.5% for the 12 months prior. And we were watching the residential property in particular and the increase in the medium average sale prices for you. So that's here on the executive summary. But if you want to scroll down, Diana, we have a little bit more. This is the CPI data for you and that national unemployment. So go ahead and go to the next one, I think is where we're going to talk about a little bit more. Showing that employment rate for you instead of just unemployment. We also have shown you the employment job growth and where that was occurring for that third quarter as compared to the 12 months prior. And I don't know if you want to interrupt with questions as we're going through these sections, or if we just want to wait until we get through these pieces, but feel free to let me know if you have questions or comments.
Why don't you move through and then we'll take some questions.
Okay, sounds good. So the next page, and I'm having trouble seeing it, so I'm going to look at my other screen. Sorry to look sideways on you here. So we also have the U6 unemployment rate that was requested in the past by Commissioner Bozovich. So looking at a different measurement for unemployment. provides you with some different data there. And household income for Oregon, and specifically there, they're tracking this median household income by county. So that's very interesting for us to be able to see where Lane County fits with our other counties, and kind of gives you some background data on those. And just for those maybe not looking at the report, the Oregon household income was $63,426, whereas Lane County, now I'm not spotting us, was $53,161. So for you to see that comparison, Oregon versus Lane County. If you go ahead and go on to the next page, we do have some real estate statistics. So that's where you're going to see the average and the median home prices. We received that from the assessor and the RLMS. And then we also have some building permit data for land management. So not for the entire Lane County, meaning we don't have the city's data, but this will show you building permit data from our land management division. And so residential permits over that time period had decreased by 10%, whereas commercial permits had increased by 18.6%. Of course, sometimes those percentage numbers, you can see some of the numbers are not really large numbers, so the percent can change pretty dramatically, but still gives you a snapshot there of those. Then if we go to the next page, is actually a financial report that shows for the 3 quarters comparing budget to actuals. So we were trending where we would expect, about 70, just over 70% on our revenue coming in, and then expenses being lower. One of the larger expenses that shows lower than maybe anticipated at that time is transfers. Many times our transfers out, it was at about 46%, but those are timed for things like debt service payments that may not be due until June. And so you'll see it doesn't really follow a month by month, quarter by quarter trend. By the end of the year, that will be much closer to 100. So trending where we would expect it to. The next page, if we look just at the general fund, which as you all know is our most discretionary fund, it also was positive and within anticipated trends. So the revenue coming in as expected, and the second page, next page being the expenditures and where those at, also trending as expected. And just to fourth quarter in general, just as I'm looking at year-end reports, starting to look at those, we're not seeing anything dramatically different for the general fund. As you've heard from us through budget committee, we don't anticipate a large impact to the general fund with COVID. We're of course watching closely. There might be pockets of areas, but overall the year end is still looking fairly decent. So maybe with that, I'm open for questions.
Any questions or comments from anyone? This is a discussion item only, so there's no motion necessarily. Okay, I don't see any. There's nothing like looking to the good times compared to nowadays. Commissioner Burney.
So Christine, correct me if I'm wrong. This is looking at the world as it was.
It is, yeah.
And,
which might be useful for us to document looking backwards, was part of why we thought it might be valuable to have this on the record as the end of March. Yeah.
No, that I get it. And again, this is a question. And given that this usually would be an indicator that could help inform us moving forward, it's probably less utilitarian at this point in time. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other comments or hands raised. So thank you very much. We look forward to the fourth quarter report.
Yes, yeah.
We'll move on to county administration announcements.
Yes, Chair Buck, Commissioners, as you probably noticed, I am not Steve Mokrahysky. Steve is out of the office and on vacation until Thursday when he'll be back. I'm happy to say that he is camping in his own county in Lane County, spending money locally and successfully retaining physical distancing while he and his family takes advantage of a lot of the mountain biking trails here in the county. And then really quickly, this week, July 19th through the 25th, is Parole and Probation Week. It's dedicated to pretrial parole and probation supervision all this week. It's an opportunity to recognize the talented individuals that play such an important and necessary role in the life of the county. So please go out of the way to be kind and supportive to your parole officers. I think that's all I have today.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on to commissioner's business. The first one is announcements. Any announcements? I'll just mention that I did attend the NACO annual conference virtually yesterday. It was about 2 hours. It was interesting to do virtually. I've not been before actually in person other than the legislative conference that we did before COVID hit. And we were able to vote online. It took some work to kind of get the system down on how to vote, but it went pretty smoothly. I have not seen the presidential appointments for anything other than the main committee chairs and vice chairs. So I don't know what's come out since then. The Association of County is looking into the transportation appointment that I applied for and mentioned to you all earlier. So when I know more, I'll let you know. Any other announcements? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to future board assignment requests. Any future board assignment requests? I don't see anybody, but I do have one. So I got a request from Mo Young, our Equity and Access Advisor, who mentioned that as part of our Black Lives Matter resolution, they're having listening sessions, and has asked if we would be willing to have a listening session of our own on August 18th in conjunction with our evening public comment period. I'm supportive. We don't know how much public comment we'll get, but it is about listening to the public. And perhaps, Mr. Rickoff, you may be able to describe this a little bit more for the rest of the board.
Certainly, Chair Buck, Commissioners. This really is a chance to be part of a 6 to 8 session series that is going through the community. And the focus is a chance really to listen and learn, to understand the experiences of members in the communities of color here in Lane County. So what we would expect would be an outreach to organizations that have been focusing on these issues, from the NAACP to Black Lives Matter to Blacks in Government, to Latinx organizations, the federally recognized tribes that are here in Lane County, and really a chance to hear what is working, what is challenging, and have a sense of how we can continue to do the anti-racist work that we've committed to.
Very good. We expected maybe 45 minutes to an hour of the listening session. And normally this public comment period is dedicated to just that. So we need to have enough support from the board to adjust that meeting to do both, if that's acceptable to everybody. Commissioner Burney, and I think I got a thumbs up from Sorensen and Jay. Commissioner Burney, you wanted to mention something?
Yeah, so does this mean that Asian Americans, Native Americans, people with different gender preferences? I mean, I just am trying to understand what the county's definition of anti-racism is, because, and you know where I'm coming from, Greg. I mean, how inclusionary is this really? And given the fact that we have a rainbow, if you want to talk inclusion, true inclusion, that will affect what kind of groups you reach out to. And the more you reach out, the more I would like to know what the structure is, what the objectives of this will be, especially if this would be the inaugural, as I understand the request, the inaugural of a series of listening sessions. And I would hope that that thought through there is also a report back, right, to the board after the series of sessions that occurred that we initiated. If we do, what the learnings and takeaways are in terms of actionable items.
Yes, Chair Buck, Commissioner Burney, and I was certainly remiss in terms of the very quick list I put together. I would say at this point, direct us. This will not necessarily be the inaugural experience. These events are going to be happening. This will be one of those series. I think it'll be of particular note given the fact that the elected officials will be present virtually and that a lot of folks will want to have a chance to talk to you. But I would say it's going to be a very inclusive in terms of race and ethnicity. I think there will be other allies involved there, but it really is meant to focus on issues of race and ethnicity. But I would say please direct me and Mo Young in terms of how you want this to be.
Thank you. I was just seeking clarification. Obviously, I'm supportive and will give you that nod too, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have enough support for that. And is there any other future board assignment requests? Okay, I don't see any. We'll move on to review of assignments.
All right, and I will need your help here, commissioners. There are two assignments connected to the COVID report I did here, and forgive my language, Commissioner Bosevich, but really you're interested in looking at death trends since COVID and what are we learning in terms of how those numbers might be moving. You named specifically suicide and death by overdose, but you're really wanting to know what the overall death trends are looking like, what's raising and what might be sinking. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. You know, we normally get a report as part of our semi-annual Board of Health update that has a lot of that information, and just looking for changes that have happened since COVID came about, both positive and negative. I would hope that we're seeing a positive mortality report on traffic accidents as we have a huge decrease in vehicle miles traveled in the county. So just kind of wanting to understand a little bit bigger picture, not only how COVID-19's changing things, but also just how our response has changed some of those trends. And along with that was the influenza, pneumonia, how that's tracking, because we usually see a second spike of influenza and pneumonia in April. And by then we were into severe social distancing. My guess is we did not see it.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm getting a notification that we need to make sure we have 3 head nods from Diana for that, and I'm supportive.
Okay.
Commissioner Burney is supportive. It's okay. We got head nods for that.
All 5. The other one that came from Commissioner Burney, and it was a database or other report that showed which businesses in Lane County had received any COVID aid through the federal or state government. Is that accurate, sir?
Yes, and the amounts, so we can get a feel for the dollars that are being injected into our community.
Okay, we also need enough head nods for that as well. I'm supportive. Okay, looks like we're all supportive of that.
All right. Then just before our lunch break, we talked about the history of Ferry Street Bridge in relation to the Black community, and that there were a number of questions in terms of property ownership. What, was this indeed marginalized land and a marginalization of people, both in terms of how that was initiated and where that went. But we're really looking at a more thorough examination of the Black experience in Eugene. I know one of the things that's been mentioned with this project is it's meant to be a comprehensive review and part of what would be an educational walking tour. It's certainly meant to have that historic focus. I've not been privy to those meetings. My understanding is the NACP is the leading agency really pushing that forward. But you are looking for a report back with a more thorough understanding of the role that, what the community in the Ferry Street Bridge was like, what it played in the life of the Black community.
I believe that included a resolution of acknowledgement. Commissioner Burney?
Greg, I would like to offer a resource to your staff in that regard. And offline, I'd like to connect you to an 89-year-old gentleman named African-American named Ben Johnson, who attended the University of Oregon in 1950, who he and his roommate were the only African-Americans at the University of Oregon at that time, who's still alive, and who gave me an oral history 30 years ago when I moved here of Springfield and Lane County in terms of that lived experience, that while he is still with us, I think he would, and he lives in Vancouver, I think he would be and grew up living in Vanport, by the way, Heather. I think he would be an unbelievable resource for our county and our state when you go and do that research.
Thank you. That sounds tremendous. And then finally, the listening session that Mo Young is putting together, that you are interested in holding the listening session in August over the evening where you would normally have community comments. So we'll put that together and bring the agenda back for your consideration as Mo gets these created. Was there anything I missed?
That sounds pretty complete for me. Okay from everybody else? Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Well, at this point in time, we will be moving into our executive session. Commissioner Bozovich.
I have one quick item of other business I'd like to bring up.
Yes, please.
Earlier in the board meeting today, after a motion had been made and seconded it, and we were into debate on that motion, the chair recognized somebody other than a board member to participate in deliberations of that motion. I do not feel that that was a proper thing to do. I did not respond to that person because I didn't feel like they should be participating in our deliberation of a specific motion. And I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention, that we really need to think carefully about who is recognized to speak at what time. And I just want to say that some of what she brought up, I didn't respond to. And the rumors, et cetera, I won't forget some of the rumors that happened about us giving ourselves 19% pay raises and other rumors that were completely unfounded prior, just as probably these rumors, et cetera, are probably unfounded. It was so inappropriate, and I just can't tell you how upset I was that I was having somebody other than a board member start trying to debate me while there was a motion on the floor waiting to be voted on, particularly a board order.
I'll just do a quick response. This was an invited panelist from our staff regarding this item, and we did have comments back and forth with staff during that time. It was not something that was done out of any negative effect for us as a board, but it was an invited panelist.
I appreciate that she was there, but usually even when we have invited panelists, once we've made a motion about a board order, they're not recognized unless a board member asks a specific question to that panelist and wants a response. There was no question to that panelist, and yet she was recognized because she asked to be recognized. It was, as far as procedure goes, probably not done really well. I appreciate that you weren't doing it intentionally, but the attack that came afterwards was completely uncalled for.
Any other final comments before we go into executive session? Okay, don't stay. So I'll read ourselves into executive session. So the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel regarding the rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-660 subsection 2 subsection H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. I do not see the need to arise at this time, but we do reserve that right. So we will go into our executive session for it's Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. We will log off on this session and we'll give each of us about 5 minutes to log into our executive session. So thank you very much.